Traoré just said what many Africans have been thinking for years, that foreign embassies will fund cultural events, but never science and research. Actually, let's pay attention to this video and also pay keen attention also to the caption on the screen.
J'ai un coup de gueule à l'endroit de la jeunesse. Il faut que nous nous réveillons. Je le dis et je vais continuer à le dire. Ne croyez pas que boire, danser, chanter, faire la fête peut nous amener à atteindre un certain niveau. À travers ce comportement, on ne peut que rester esclave, à consommer ce qu'eux ils produisent, mais surtout en leur donnant à vil prix nos richesses, notre sous-sol, parce qu'on n'a pas le choix, on ne sait rien faire. Moi, je suis venu pour encourager la recherche, pour encourager l'innovation, pour encourager la technologie. Il faut que nous puissions créer. C'est bien que ça se passe comme ça, en rien, mais c'est sérieux. J'invite donc la jeunesse à revoir beaucoup de choses. Et comme je l'ai dit la dernière fois quand j'avais rencontré donc, les élèves au niveau de la journée de l'excellence, arrêtez sur vos réseaux sociaux, vos plateformes numériques là, de faire les choses inutiles. Il y a des pages, il y a des canaux où on apprend la science, où on apprend à faire des choses. Je disais, vous allez trouver des Indiens, des Pakistanais, des gens de certains pays en tout cas qui arrivent à fabriquer des outils élémentaires et qui postent sur les réseaux sociaux. Intéressez-vous à ça pour essayer de reproduire ici. Au lieu d'aller vous mettre à regarder les danses, à vous-même vous mettre à danser comme un masque, on ne sait pas pourquoi. Mais c'est pas ça. Mais les autres vous encouragent dans ça. Mais regardez certaines ambassades ici, ils ne financent que ça. Allez-y dans leurs ambassades avec un projet scientifique, technologique ou bien une invention que vous voulez développer. Ça ne les intéresse pas. Si vous êtes d'accord, ils vous amènent chez eux. Vous partez faire là-bas. Mais si c'est pour faire ici, ils ne vont jamais vous financer. Mais si vous partez avec un projet voilà, de distraction, de trucs, ils vont vous aider, ils vont vous financer. Et après, ils vont sortir dire que non, c'est pour valoriser la culture burkinabé. Les gars, on ne veut pas de ça. On veut la technologie d'abord. La culture, c'est nous-mêmes, on va financer notre propre culture et on trouvera tous les moyens de le faire. Donc, on ne demande pas à quelqu'un de venir financer la culture burkinabé. Ça, c'est intrinsèque à nous, c'est fondamental. On va le faire nous-mêmes. On ne demande même pas de l'aide à quelqu'un pour faire ça. Donc, faites l'expérience. Allez dans leurs ambassades, présentez vos inventions pour le faire ici. Ils ne vont jamais vous aider. Et ça ne vous dit rien.
There is an amazing video there by Spearhead, courtesy also of Faso 7 TV. I was laughing because, number one, I love to hear this man talk. I promise. Guys, I love to hear this man talk. He just has an amazing aura, you know, and just seeing him relate, you know, with young people, telling them about this and that. And I was just happy that we found a video where we were able to follow what he was saying through the captions. And what he just said is more than a speech. It's actually a mirror. Because if we are being honest, he's very right. Across Africa today, you will find foreign embassies, NGOs, and international organizations constantly sponsoring cultural events. And listen, there's nothing wrong with that. Culture is very important. But the question Traoré is raising is this. Why do the same embassies go silent when it comes to funding African science and innovation? Why is it easy to find money for an award show, but almost impossible to find money for a chemistry lab or even a research project? Think about it. When was the last time you saw a big foreign embassy sponsor a Kenyan robotics team, maybe a Nigerian agricultural innovation program, or a Tanzanian medical research center? With the same publicity and excitement they give to a cultural event. When was the last time? I know you won't remember because it rarely happens. And that is what Ibrahim Traoré meant when he said, they will fund culture, but not science. And I know he was not dismissing culture. He was actually exposing the imbalance. And that imbalance should be something that bothers all of us, because this is not just about art versus science. It's also about what kind of Africa the world prefers to see. They love to see an Africa that entertains, but not an Africa that innovates. They will love to see an Africa that performs, but they won't want to see an Africa that produces. And right now, the global system seems more comfortable with the first one, an Africa that performs. Africa that will dance, that will paint, that will sing. Because that Africa looks very colorful and very harmless. But an Africa that studies, invents, and builds, that Africa changes the global order. And who wants that? Who wants that? And that's exactly why Traoré message definitely hit so deep. Even me, I was like, yeah, there's a lot of truth in this. And the global north understands something we often forget. Knowledge equals power. And whoever controls what we learn, what we research, and what we know controls how far we can go. When you look at it closely, this whole setup is not accidental, it's by design. They will fund what keeps us visible and colorful, but not what makes us powerful. Does that make sense? They will celebrate the parts of Africa that is going to entertain, but they will also ignore completely the parts that could make Africa independent. So, while we dance on these global stages, you have our universities struggling to buy basic lab equipment. Well, you have our artists winning international awards. And guys, this is not actually culture versus science or research. We are just trying to establish something. When you have our international artists winning awards, you also have researchers here who are begging for grants to study local diseases or our indigenous plants. Well, you have influencers who are getting global brand deals. Again, you'll have engineers who are also leaving the continent to work in other people's industries because the continent does not back them up. And it's not because we lack talent. It's because the money follows the message. And the message they want is a performing Africa, a colorful one, not a producing one. Look around. There is funding for creative partnerships, cultural dialogues, and even music collaborations, but barely any for research into renewable energy, agriculture, or local technology. Because once Africa controls its own innovation, it no longer has to rely on the West for solutions. And I know someone will be like, Lynn, it's not a must they fund. Why can't Africa fund itself? We are going to get to that. We are also going to deal with that. So hold on. Anyway, back to what I was saying. The moment we take control, you'll see how power dynamics are going to change. Guys, please understand this. An Africa that entertains the world is very good for business. It keeps us dependent on foreign products, foreign technology, and also foreign validation. But an Africa that builds its own future, that actually threatens the entire system, because then we start making our own medicines instead of importing them. We design our own apps instead of depending on Silicon Valley. We study our own soil, plants, herbs, instead of waiting for the Western companies to patent what our ancestors already knew. And that is the Africa they don't want to see. An Africa that thinks, invents, and questions. And that's the uncomfortable truth. When Traoré said what he said, he wasn't attacking art. He was attacking a system that uses art to distract and also to control. Now, let's bring this conversation home to Kenya, because what Traoré said is not just true for Burkina Faso. It's happening right here too. Kenya has brilliant minds, from students developing robotics in Kisumu to innovators who are designing water purifying technology in Turkana. It also has young researchers at the University of Nairobi studying soil health and climate adaptation. But when it comes to funding, these projects usually struggle. Our National Research Fund, the very body meant to support local innovation, constantly complains about inadequate resources. Government promised to allocate 2% of our GDP to research and development. As of last year, according to UNESCO, Kenya still spends less than 1%. That means when we talk about innovation, we are not honestly investing in it. Meanwhile, the events that will get the money are the ones that, as we said, are going to make Africa look beautiful. We are talking about creative hubs, music festivals, fashion shows, etc., etc. That is where the sponsorships go. And that's exactly what Ibrahim Traoré was calling out, not to shame anyone, but also to make us see how the pattern works. Because if your brightest young people keep seeing that art gets funding and science doesn't, what message are we sending? We are basically saying, please be seen, but don't build. Perform, but don't produce. And that is very dangerous because it shapes what the next generation values. When you make fame easier to access than invention, you end up with a country that has 1,000 influencers, but only a handful of researchers. And that is not progress, guys. That is us being programmed. And if you think about it, this same pattern that Ibrahim Traoré is talking about, it doesn't just happen through embassies or governments. It's happening right here on our phones. Social media has become the new classroom for millions of Africans, but it's also the new battlefield for our attention. The algorithms, I know guys say my algorithm, yeah. The algorithms, those invisible systems that decide what you see online, they don't work by accident. They push what keeps you scrolling, not what helps you grow. So, well, you see 1,000 videos of gossip, drama, and celebrity trends wakioshana miguu na champagne, you will rarely see African innovation, African science, or even African history trending. It's not that those things don't exist. They just don't get promoted. If a Kenyan student builds a robot, the post might get a few hundred likes if it's lucky. But if a celebrity says something controversial, it will definitely get millions of views overnight. And that is how the system keeps us busy. Busy reacting, busy consuming, but never really learning or inventing anything. And now, this is why Traoré is telling the youths in Burkina Faso, use social media to learn, not to get distracted, because distraction is the new form of colonization. They will not come here, with their things, or they will no longer need to silence us. They will not come here with their arms. They are not going to make us slaves anymore. They will not even need to silence us. They just need to entertain us. They don't need to ban books anymore. They just need to make books boring and influencers addictive. And they don't need to control our land. They just need to control our timelines, our algorithms. And it's working. Obviously, I think majority of us are victims. We wake up and the first thing we do is check our phones, not the news, not a research site, not even an article about our economy. But, who said what, who wore what, who went where? That's very interesting for us to check out. And that's the new design of control. Keep Africans entertained and they will never ask hard questions. Keep them scrolling and they won't notice who is running the economies. Feed them trends and they'll forget their potential, because an entertained continent is easier to control than an educated one. And here's the sad part. It's not just foreigners doing it anymore. And this is why I said we are going to address ourselves, right? We can be busy here calling out foreign embassies for not funding science and innovation, but we really need to look at ourselves as well, because we are also feeding the same system. Our own creators, brands, and media houses often prioritize what is loud over what is meaningful, because that is what is going to bring the clicks and the views, and it's okay. So even when we think we are the ones controlling the narrative, we are still playing inside the system that someone else built. And that's the digital trap Traoré was warning us about. The war is no longer fought on the battlefield. It's fought where? On our algorithms, our feed. So when he says, use the internet to learn, he's not just advising, he's actually giving us a warning. Because the same phone that can distract you can also liberate you if you use it right. It can be a tool or it can be a trap. And right now, too many of us are choosing the trap. We've become so used to consuming entertainment that real information feels very heavy. We scroll past knowledge because this looks like a lot of work. But that's exactly how we lose. We are not going to lose this time through violence, but we are going to lose through distraction. And if we don't wake up soon, we are going to raise a generation that knows every influencer's name, but cannot even name 5 African inventors. That's the future Traoré doesn't want for Africa, and neither should we. So what he said, might sound small to some people. This is just another guy speaking. But if you really sit with it, it's one of the most important messages of our time. Because this is not just about Burkina Faso, it's about the kind of future Africa is being programmed to have. The global north has learned that you don't need to occupy a country to control it anymore. You just need to shape what its people value. If you can control what they dream about, what they study, what they celebrate, you've already won. And that's exactly what is happening. They've convinced us that creativity is enough, that being famous equals also being successful, that visibility is also power, when in reality, knowledge still remains the power we have. They will happily fund a festival, sponsor an award, or even finance a talk show, because none of that threatens their control. And that looks very progressive and very empowering. But at the end of the day, we are still dependent on their systems, their technologies, their industries, their patents. And that's what Traoré is exposing. That kind of soft, polite colonization that doesn't need weapons anymore. It just needs influence and attention. And we, the people, are at the center of it all. Because we hold the phones, we create the content, we drive the culture. If they can keep us entertained, they can keep us harmless. But the moment we start using the same energy to question, to innovate, to research, the game changes. That's why this president keeps talking about self-reliance. He's not saying reject the world. He's saying wake up, use the platforms, but don't be used by them. Collaborate, but please don't depend. Learn from others, but build for yourself. And honestly, that message should be echoing across every African country, because the problem isn't just what the global north is doing, it's also what our own leaders allow. When governments prioritize politics over education, when ministries are there spending more money on public image than public innovation, when you have MPs who are fighting because of the per diems instead of fighting over research funding, then foreign embassies will step in and fill that gap, and they are going to do it on their own terms. And that is how dependency is maintained. They'll come in politely, quietly, behind sponsorship banners, but they know what they are doing. We need to start asking harder questions. Why do our universities still struggle for basic funding? Well, foreign embassies host month-long cultural events. Why can't our governments invest in labs with the same excitement they launch these concerts also? Why our own scientists begging for grants? Well, the celebrities will get brand deals worth millions, even from governments. Because it says something about what we reward, what we respect, and what we allow ourselves to become. And to be clear, this is not an attack against artists. Africa needs the storytellers, the musicians, the filmmakers, the fashionistas, but also remember, art without empowerment just becomes entertainment. Entertainment without knowledge becomes what? Control. And then control without awareness becomes slavery. Modern day slavery. So yes, Ibrahim Traoré's words might sound simple, but they carry generations of truth. If we don't invest in our own science, we will always be consumers but never creators. If we don't use our own knowledge, others will sell it back to us at a profit. They are doing that with our raw materials. If we don't wake up, we'll keep mistaking this applause for progress, because they will fund our music, but they will not go funding our own minds. They will build us theaters, but not laboratories. They will train our performers, but they won't care about our professors. And as long as that remains true, Africa will keep entertaining the world while begging it for solutions. So the real question now is not about what Ibrahim Traoré said. It's whether we are finally ready to listen. Because the world won't stop distracting us. The algorithms won't shift unless we curate it that way. They will not start at promoting education. And foreign embassies won't suddenly now, because Lynn had this conversation, they won't prioritize our independence or research. That is on us. It starts with choosing what we watch, what we share, and what we value. It starts with demanding that our politicians fund knowledge the same way they fund their campaigns. It starts with understanding that being loud is not the same as being liberated. Please let that sink in. The future of this continent depends on how we spend our attention, because attention is the new currency. So yes, our favorite human, Traoré, said it best. And I will also say it again. These people will keep funding our culture, but not our research. They will reward our visibility, but they also fear our intelligence. And until we start building our own systems, our own research, our own technology, our own solutions, Africa will keep dancing to someone else's tech and someone else's rhythm. And the real revolution begins when we stop performing for the world and start performing for our own progress. And maybe this is the part we also don't like to admit. We don't actually need to rely on embassies to fund anything. We can do it ourselves. We have the brains, the land, the creativity, and the population to sustain our own growth. What we lack is leadership and the will to prioritize our people over personal gain. If African governments stopped stealing public money, stopped overborrowing, stopped flying first class while hospitals are collapsing, lecturers are not even getting paid, then we would have enough to build laboratories in every country, not just stadiums. We would actually build labs as well. If the billions lost in corruption each year, in Kenya it's 2 billion a day. Last time I checked, a whole president confessed we lose 2 billion a day to corruption. If that money was redirected into research, health, tech, Africa would already be producing its own medicine, our own apps, our own software, everything. We would not be begging embassies for grants to study our own soil or diseases. Because truthfully, Africa's problem has never been, at a potential. We have people who can do the work. But our biggest problem is priorities. What are the politicians prioritizing? They would rather open foreign-funded cultural centers, than fund a local university. Then they'll take pictures at international summits, but ignore scientists in their own countries. They will celebrate youth empowerment, while they also refuse to empower the youth with actual resources. We can't keep blaming the world for taking advantage when our own politicians leave the doors wide open. And I believe it's also time to stop asking embassies to build what our taxes should already be funding. Kenya can fund Kenyan science. Nigeria can fund Nigerian innovation. Ghana, Tanzania, Uganda, South Africa. We all can. Because once we start funding our own knowledge, no one can control it. Once we start trusting our own experts, No one will dictate to us anything. Once we start believing that solutions can come from here, not from development partners, we start becoming unstoppable. The day African youth realize that the change we are waiting for is already in our hands, everything will shift. We don't need permission to build. We don't need validation to innovate. We just need courage and integrity. And also we need to elect politicians who value progress over politics. So yes, Ibrahim Traoré exposed the truth about foreign funding, but he also reminded us that the real revolution starts with self-belief. Because if Africa can feed the world, mine its minerals, power its industries, and inspire its art, then surely Africa can fund its own future. We do not need embassies writing checks for our own growth. We just need governments that stop stealing and citizens that can genuinely hold them accountable. And we also need a generation that chooses substance. Because when Africa finally decides to fund Africa, nobody will ever be able to fund our silence again. Nobody. Let us wake up. And I love the part where he told the youths, use that phone, but use it to also build yourself. Go online and see how innovators are doing it. Join research groups, follow professors. At the end of the day, this algorithm can help us, but it can also trap us. And by the time we know it, then their algorithms or their apps are designed in a way only tech is visible to their audience. And us here, we view pretty much everything. There, by the way, I don't know, I saw someone saying maybe the apps in China, they've been designed in a way, they just show their citizens, innovation, inventions, beautiful things that people can learn from. But here, who cares? Who cares? And understand nothing is an accident, guys. Everything in this life is by design. It's by design. People will keep us busy because they do not want us inventing or researching. And me, I'm not going to sit here and even blame these embassies. They can do whatever they want. That's their money. My main concern is even towards our own governments that don't see the use of these things. Then they are okay telling you how they are going to build this and this part. When was the last time you heard someone say they are going to build a world-class laboratory? Nah, even me, I can't remember. But once again, please go and watch that video carefully. Me, I'm all for leaders that are encouraging self-reliance. I'm all for leaders that are encouraging research, invention. I'm all for leaders that are saying, let's fund this and this, let's study our soil. I'm going to support that till the end of the day. I'm actually going to support that. But let me know what your thoughts are on the comment section. Me, I'm for self-reliance. Let us rely on ourselves. I was so shocked to see we even have toothpicks that are manufactured in China. In our own markets, you will go and see toothpick and see made in China. You are like, toothpick, mti, kuchonga. How now? That is what happens when we don't become a society that invents, a society that does research. That is what happens. We will even import toothpicks because we don't even have the technology or we don't know how to make those toothpicks. Alafu you go and see those toothpicks are being made by 12-year-olds in other countries. You get what I'm saying? So guys, share your thoughts on the comment section. I'm interested in your take on what Traoré said. And for me, I think it was amazing to see him talk and to see him relate to young people like that. You genuinely want a president that can talk to young people like that. He was there like a big brother, not condemning, not calling young people criminals, but they are talking and engaging with these young people. It was beautiful to witness. So share your thoughts with me on the comment section. That's it from me. I gotta let this team of mine go today because the things they are showing me behind the scenes, I gotta wrap it up, guys. But I do appreciate you. Thank you for supporting independent journalism. Thank you for contributing. Our MPESA number is there, our PayBill is there, our PayPal is there. So I really do appreciate you. And thank you for subscribing and sharing this work. Let's continue doing what we are doing, learning, unlearning, and relearning. My name is Lynn Ngugi. See you next time.